For the last 16 years, I've had the wary trust of the beavers that live in this pond. I've really grown quite fond of them. During the warm months, the beavers will eat a large amount of non-woody greenery. To make it through the winter, however, they have to gather a lot of branches to form their winter larder. Only certain tree species have the edible bark and cambium that they need as food under the ice. Even among the edible species, some have less food value than others. Over the last 16 years, I have watched as they have slowly depleted the supply of edible species that are within a safe distance of their pond. This June, they reached the same conclusion I had. Despite my bringing them truckloads of poplar each autumn, they decided that they had run out of food and needed to move to another area. They chose to move about half a mile downstream to an area that another beaver family had abandoned about 3 years ago. I was saddened to see them go, but I respected their decision. In October, I was shocked when they came back. I was happy, but concerned that they had felt it was necessary to return to an area that they had already decided was depleted of food. I quickly delivered 5 pickup truckloads of poplar to them, but it does not seem to have translated into a large enough winter larder to get all 5 of them safely through the winter. For that reason, I'm going to cut down this large poplar and take the branches to them. Before we begin to cut down a tree, we have to have a plan. In this case, we want this poplar to fall into this open space over here. We want to avoid hitting the beehive over there. So we have to have a risk assessment as part of our plan, and we also have to have a safe retreat. In this case, the safe retreat seems pretty obvious. Over on this side, we've got a whole bunch of limbs and other debris in the way that would make it hard to try and go that way. On this other side, however, there's a clear escape path with no impediments, so that would seem a very logical choice. And then there's this 7 or 8 inch sugar maple that would prevent the end from flying off to the left when the tree goes down. So that looks like the very obvious choice for the escape route. Unfortunately, planning the escape route is only one part of the threat assessment. In this case, we really need to look up at the top of the tree and see what's happening there. We notice that it does lean over to the left, and as we go up, we see that there is another tree that's lodged in it. Swinging our view around 90 degrees, we go up the tree, we get way up there, and we see there's another tree there, and it's just loaded with dead limbs. There's a few hangers there. So there's a very real risk that when we cut this main support tree, some of those limbs are going to dislodge, and they're going to come flying down at us from a height of about 40 to 50 feet. And this tree that's over here is going to want to start coming down. If we look at the base, we can see that the root plate has already lifted there. So we know that that tree is very much ready to go. Taking a closer look at the tree and the root plate, we come over and start going up the tree, and we see that it's got a bunch of fungus that's formed on it. And that gives us the clue that the tree is, if not already dead, at least severely compromised, and because of that we may not be able to expect much support from its roots. So we definitely have to expect that this tree is going to come down when we cut the tree over there that's supporting it. Things get worse, however. If we go up that tree, we see that about 17 feet up, it's already leaning against this small white pine. So that white pine is potentially going to get whipped straight towards where I'm standing, which is right along what we were planning as our escape route. So that becomes a very serious hazard. This white pine is a good 40 or maybe even 50 feet tall, and so it could get whipped well down into our escape path. So that makes our escape path pretty much a bad choice. So there's that little pine that's going to be displaced by this big poplar when we cut down our big poplar. Additionally, we've got this second poplar, and although it's not in intimate contact with the dead poplar, the lean of our major tree is such that when everything starts to go, there may be a tendency for things to fall to the right. So in addition to the pine, we've got this second smaller poplar that could get whipped down into our escape area as well. So the bottom line is, this is not an acceptable escape path. We're going to have to look at the other side of the tree. So to be able to safely cut down this tree, we have to take all of that stuff and move it out of the way so that we have a safe retreat over into the hemlocks there, which are out of the fall zone for each of the aforementioned trees. So we're going to have to move a lot of stuff. We're going to put a lot more work into preparing the safe retreat route than we are into the few simple cuts that it will take to fell the poplar we're after. Okay, so we've got a new escape path cleared to go the other direction, and I will be retreating over amongst those hemlocks where the orange hookaroon is. This illustration depicts the forces on our tree. Towards the top in blue we have the desired direction of fall. Over to the right we have the apparent lean of the tree. What we're not quite sure about is the probable force from the supported widowmaker, the dead poplar that's leaning into our poplar. This is probably exerting a force on it, but we don't know whether that is going to be sustained and fall with the tree, or whether the ground is frozen enough to lock that dead tree in place. But we'll see when we cut down our tree. We're going to cut a shallow notch in the desired direction of fall. We're going to keep this shallow because we want to have a fairly large distance between the hinge and the trigger that will be at the back of the tree. Keeping that distance large will minimize the stresses that these areas will feel. Next, we will make a plunge cut through the tree. We'll leave the hinge fairly narrow on the side where the compression will be, but we don't want the tree to risk falling over in the direction of the apparent lean and where the probable force is. So we'll keep the hinge wider over on the left side. Next, we'll widen our back cut to the rear. Next, we'll clip off the corner at D. This is so that we'll be able to put a wedge in and have it near the very back of the tree. At this point, we have points A, B, C, and D, and we're not really sure what the stresses in them are. B is almost certainly under compression. D is almost certainly under tension, but it's hard to say about points A and C because we're not really sure what kind of force the leaner is putting on our tree. Next, we insert the wedge at the back of the tree. We leave a little bit of separation between D and the wedge because we don't want to have to cut all the way against our wedge. We want there to be some space so that we don't risk cutting into the wedge. Finally, we cut the back strap, moving from C to D. As soon as we have severed the trigger, the tree will probably begin to move. We will already be exiting rapidly stage left and hoping to get out of there before anything falls out of the tree. If the tree does fall, that is our desired outcome. The worst case for us will be if the tree doesn't fall. Now we will have to make it fall, and we'll have to pound on the wedge, and each time we pound we'll be risking having some of the dead branches overhead coming down on us. So that'll be a very tricky case if that develops. What we'll have to do is, from outside the fall zone, assess the situation, make sure that nothing is ready to fall, and that everything is quit moving. Then we'll have to go in and do one quick hard hit on the wedge and exit immediately again, and make sure that everything is stable before we go back under. And we'll have to repeat that process, putting ourselves at risk each time, hitting the wedge and getting out of there. Hopefully that won't happen and the tree will go down. Whether or not the various other trees come down with it is another matter. Okay, we got our shallow notch cut and we're not dead yet, so we'll continue on, make the plunge cut as a start to the back cut. Again, we want this to be a shallow notch because we want this front part that's going to be resisting the lean and the back part that's going to be resisting the lean to be as far apart as possible so they'll be able to resist the overturning moments that are acting on this tree until we cut that back part through and scamper out of the way. In addition to a significant lean that way, this tree by itself has a little bit of a lean backwards. So we're going to want to have a wedge in there to make sure that it doesn't go back on us. We've cut the back cut around to here and it's all the way through. We've left a little strap over here that will be our release. We've also come in and taken that angle and finished this so that it goes in perpendicular there and we can put the wedge in. At this point we're putting the wedge in primarily to make sure the kerf doesn't close and pinch our saw when we're trying to cut that trigger. So we're not going to try and drive this in hard, we're just going to set it in so that it holds the kerf open. And we want to make sure we've got a little separation so that when we do cut with our saw we aren't going to come in contact with the wedge. So at least an inch, and just put it in by hand so that it holds the kerf open. Okay, so none of the other problems we were anticipating occurred, but we do have that leaner still hanging up there. So as follow-up, we'll go ahead and get that out of there.